My boss called me drunk girl until she found out I was her new supervisor. Drunk girl. Hey, drunk girl, over here. I froze in the hallway of Meridian Marketing Solutions, my new employee badge still warm from the laminator. 26 years old, master's degree in business administration, 3 years of management experience, and I was being called drunk girl on my first day. The voice belonged to a woman in her early 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a power suit that screamed middle management. She was pointing directly at me from across the break room, talking to 2 other employees who turned to stare. That's the one from the elevator yesterday, she continued loudly. Completely hammered at 2 in the afternoon. I can't believe they hired someone like that. My stomach dropped. Yesterday. The elevator incident. I'd been coming back from my final interview with the regional director, feeling confident about landing the operations supervisor position I'd applied for. The elevator was crowded, and I was exhausted from a week of interviews and preparation. When it lurched suddenly between the 3rd and 4th floors, I stumbled slightly and grabbed the handrail. That's when I noticed her, the same blonde woman now calling me drunk girl, wrinkle her nose and step away from me like I was contagious. At the time, I thought maybe I'd accidentally bumped into her. I'd even said, "Excuse me," but she'd just given me this disgusted look and whispered something to the man next to her. Now I understood. She thought I was intoxicated. The truth was far less scandalous. I have a mild inner ear condition called vestibular dysfunction that occasionally affects my balance, especially when I'm tired or stressed. It's barely noticeable most of the time, but interviews always wore me out, and apparently yesterday had been one of those days where it was more obvious. Drunk girl, she called again, waving me over. Come here for a second. I took a deep breath and walked toward her, my new employee folder clutched in my hands. The badge clipped to my blazer read, Sarah Chen, Operations Department, though she clearly hadn't bothered to look at it. Hi, I said politely. I think there might be some confusion. Oh, there's no confusion, she interrupted with a smirk. I'm Linda Morrison, Department Coordinator. I saw you yesterday, wobbling around like you'd been hitting the bottle at lunch. Now you're here bright and early Monday morning. Let me guess, entry-level data entry. File clerk. The 2 employees with her, a younger man with thick-rimmed glasses and an older woman with graying hair, looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Actually, I started. Look, Linda cut me off again, I don't know what kind of operation they were running at your last job, but here at Meridian, we maintain professional standards. I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on you. Any sign of that kind of behavior, and you'll be gone faster than you can say, happy hour. She looked so smug, so satisfied with her little power play. I could have corrected her right then. Could have explained about my medical condition, could have shown her my supervisor badge, could have told her I'd be attending the department leadership meeting in an hour where I'd be introduced as her new boss. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she publicly humiliated me without knowing a single thing about me. Maybe it was how she jumped to conclusions and was now doubling down on her assumptions. Or maybe it was the look on her face, like she was enjoying this too much. I understand, I said simply. Thank you for the feedback. Linda's eyebrows shot up, clearly surprised I hadn't pushed back. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Now, I'm sure whoever's training you is wondering where you are. Better run along. I nodded and walked away, my mind racing. I had an hour before the leadership meeting. An hour before Linda Morrison found out that drunk girl was actually her new supervisor. An hour to decide how I wanted to handle this. My first stop was human resources. The woman who'd processed my paperwork, Janet Kim, was a friendly Korean-American woman in her 50s who'd made me feel welcome during the hiring process. Sarah, she said brightly when I knocked on her door. How's your first day going? Interesting, I said, closing the door behind me. Can I ask you something confidential? Janet's expression grew concerned. Of course. What's going on? I told her about the elevator incident and Linda's assumptions. I also explained about my vestibular dysfunction, something I disclosed during the medical portion of my hiring process as required by ADA guidelines. Oh no, Janet said, shaking her head. I'm so sorry this happened. Do you want me to speak with Linda right away? This is completely unacceptable. Actually, I said, I was hoping you could tell me more about her role and her relationship with the operations department. I want to understand the dynamics before I address this. Janet pulled up Linda's file on her computer. Linda's been with the company for 8 years. She started as an administrative assistant and worked her way up to department coordinator about 3 years ago. She oversees scheduling, coordinates between different teams, manages some of the administrative staff, and handles day-to-day operational logistics. So she reports to the operations supervisor. That's right. She's been essentially running things since your predecessor, Mark Thompson, left 6 weeks ago. I think she was hoping to be promoted to the supervisor role herself. Everything clicked into place. Linda hadn't just made assumptions about a random new employee, she'd felt threatened by what she thought was competition for a job she wanted. Finding out that competition was now her boss was going to be quite the shock. Janet, can you do me a favor? Don't mention our conversation to anyone yet. I'd like to handle this myself, but I wanted HR to be aware in case there are ongoing issues. Of course, Janet said. But Sarah, if you need support, you know you can come to me anytime. What Linda did was wrong, and it won't be tolerated. I thanked her and headed to my new office, a corner space with windows overlooking the parking lot. The nameplate on the door read, Operations Supervisor, and there was a stack of personnel files on the desk, including one with Linda Morrison's name on it. I spent the next 40 minutes reviewing the files for my direct reports. Linda's performance reviews were generally positive, with notes about her organizational skills and her ability to keep projects on track. However, there were a couple of mentions about interpersonal challenges and difficulty with feedback. Her previous supervisor, Mark, had noted that she sometimes made assumptions about people and situations without gathering all the facts. Reading between the lines, it seemed like Linda was good at her job but had some issues with judgment and people skills. The kind of issues that led someone to publicly call a stranger drunk girl without bothering to learn anything about them. At 10:30, I made my way to conference room A for the department leadership meeting. Regional Director Patricia Hawkins was already there, along with the supervisors from marketing, sales, and customer service. I was the only new face in the group. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sarah Chen, our new operations supervisor," Patricia announced as I took my seat. Sarah comes to us from Morrison Industries, where she managed a team of 15 in their logistics division. She has her MBA from Seattle University and some great ideas for streamlining our processes. The other supervisors welcomed me warmly. We were just getting into the agenda when there was a knock on the conference room door. "Come in," Patricia called. Linda Morrison opened the door, carrying a stack of papers and wearing the same confident smile she'd had when calling me drunk girl 2 hours earlier. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Linda said, "but I have the quarterly reports you requested for the operations review." Her words died in her throat when she saw me sitting at the conference table with the other department heads. The stack of papers in her hand slipped slightly, and I watched her face go through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and then pure horror. "Linda," Patricia said cheerfully, "perfect timing. I'd like you to meet Sarah Chen, your new supervisor." The silence that followed was deafening. Linda stood frozen in the doorway, staring at me like I was a ghost. The other supervisors looked between us, sensing tension but not understanding its source. "Actually," I said calmly, "Linda and I met briefly this morning." "Didn't we, Linda?" She opened her mouth but no sound came out. Her face had gone from its normal peachy tone to an alarming shade of red. "Wonderful," Patricia continued, oblivious to the drama. "Linda, why don't you give those reports to Sarah directly? You two will be working closely together." Linda mechanically walked over and set the papers in front of me, her hands visibly shaking. I looked up at her with the same polite smile I'd given her earlier. "Thank you," I said. "These look very thorough. We should schedule some time this week to discuss the department's current processes. I'm particularly interested in how we handle first impressions and initial assessments." If Linda's face got any redder, I was genuinely worried she might pass out. Yes, of course," she stammered. "I should. I'll let you get back to your meeting." She practically ran from the room, leaving the other supervisors looking puzzled. "Is everything okay?" asked Mike Rodriguez, the customer service supervisor. "I think Linda is just adjusting to the change," I said diplomatically. "It can be challenging when team dynamics shift." Patricia nodded knowingly. "Linda's been holding things together since Mark left. I'm sure she's relieved to have proper leadership in place again." If only she knew. The rest of the meeting proceeded normally. We discussed quarterly goals, upcoming projects, and budget allocations. I took notes and asked thoughtful questions, establishing myself as someone who knew what she was doing. But part of my mind was already planning how to address the Linda situation. After the meeting ended, I headed back to my office. I wasn't surprised to find Linda waiting outside my door, looking like she'd been pacing. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "can we talk?" "Of course," I said, unlocking my office door. "Come in." Linda entered and immediately started talking rapidly. "I am so sorry. I had no idea who you were. I thought you were just some new entry-level hire, and I was trying to maintain department standards, and I completely misread the situation." "Linda," I said gently, "please sit down." She perched on the edge of the chair across from my desk, looking like she might bolt at any moment. "First," I said, "I want you to know that I understand you were trying to look out for the department. That shows you care about maintaining professional standards, which is important." Relief flickered across her face, but I wasn't done. "However," I continued, "there were several problems with how you handled the situation. You made assumptions about me without having any facts. You publicly labeled and embarrassed someone you didn't know. And you never once considered that there might be explanations you weren't aware of." Linda's face crumpled. "You're going to fire me, aren't you?" I studied her for a moment. She looked genuinely distressed, not just about her job security but about what she'd done. There was real remorse in her expression. "Linda, can I ask you something? Yesterday in the elevator, did you see me do anything actually inappropriate? Did I smell like alcohol? Was I loud or disruptive?" She thought about it, then shook her head slowly. "No, you just seemed a little unsteady. And you looked tired. I have a mild inner ear condition that occasionally affects my balance, especially when I'm stressed or exhausted. It's a medical condition, covered under ADA guidelines. Yesterday I just finished a long day of interviews and was particularly worn out." The color drained from Linda's face. "Oh my God. I accused someone with a disability of being drunk. I'm going to be fired and sued Anne." "Linda, stop," I said firmly. "Take a breath." She did, though it was shaky. "I'm not going to fire you," I said. "And I'm not going to file a complaint. But this situation has shown me that we need to work on some things." "Anything," she said quickly. "I'll do anything to make this right. First, I need you to understand that jumping to conclusions about people can be incredibly damaging. You labeled me drunk girl and spread that assumption to other employees. What if I had been someone with a substance abuse problem who was trying to get clean? What if your public shaming had caused me to relapse or given up trying to rebuild my life?" Linda looked stricken. I could tell she'd never considered the broader implications of her actions. "Second," I continued, "as a coordinator, you're in a position of influence. Other employees look to you to set the tone for how we treat each other. This morning, you taught them that it's okay to make fun of someone you perceive as different or problematic." "I never thought about it that way," she whispered. "I know you didn't. And that's exactly the problem we need to fix." I pulled out a notepad and wrote down a few items. "Here's what I want you to do. First, you're going to attend a workshop on unconscious bias and disability awareness. HR can arrange it. Second, we're going to have weekly one-on-one meetings where we discuss not just operational issues, but leadership and interpersonal skills." Linda nodded eagerly. "Yes, absolutely. Third, I want you to think about those 2 employees who were with you this morning. How do you think you can address the assumptions you shared with them?" She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I should apologize to them for speaking about you that way. And maybe explain that I was wrong to jump to conclusions." "That's a good start," I agreed. "But Linda, this isn't just about making things right with me. This is about becoming the kind of leader and colleague you want to be. The kind who builds people up instead of tearing them down. I do want to be better, she said, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. I've been so stressed trying to keep everything together since Mark left, and I guess I was feeling territorial about the department. But that's no excuse for how I treated you. It was the first really honest thing she'd said since sitting down. Tell me about that, I said. What's been challenging about managing things without a supervisor? Over the next 20 minutes, Linda opened up about the pressure she'd been under. She'd been doing her coordinator job plus many of the supervisor duties, working overtime, dealing with upper management, and handling personnel issues she wasn't trained for. She'd applied for the supervisor position but was told she needed more experience and management training first. I think I was resentful, she admitted. Here I'd been doing the job for 6 weeks, and they brought in someone from outside. When I saw you in the elevator looking unwell, I guess part of me wanted to find a reason why I was better qualified. That's a very honest assessment, I said. And I appreciate you sharing that. But Linda, can you see how that mindset led you to treat me unfairly? She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I was so focused on protecting my territory that I forgot to be a decent human being. We talked for another hour about department operations, her responsibilities, and how we could work together effectively. By the end of the conversation, I felt cautiously optimistic that Linda could grow from this experience. Over the next few days, I watched Linda carefully. True to her word, she spoke with the 2 employees who'd witnessed her drunk girl comments, apologizing for her inappropriate assumptions and emphasizing that everyone deserved to be treated with respect. She also threw herself into her regular duties with renewed focus, seeming determined to prove she could be professional and supportive. The real test came on Thursday afternoon. I was coming back from a client meeting, feeling particularly tired after a long day. As I walked through the office, I felt that familiar slight unsteadiness that sometimes accompanied my condition. I saw Linda notice my slightly careful gait as I passed her desk. Our eyes met, and I waited to see how she would react. Sarah, she said quietly, you look like you've had a long day. Can I get you some water or tea? It was such a small gesture, but it meant everything. Instead of jumping to conclusions, she'd shown concern and offered help. Tea would be wonderful, I said. Thank you. That weekend, I got an email from Linda that surprised me. Hi Sarah, I hope you don't mind me writing to you outside of work hours. I wanted to let you know that I've been doing a lot of thinking about our conversation on Monday. I realized that what I did to you was a form of bullying, and I'm ashamed of that. I've enrolled in not just the bias workshop you mentioned, but also a leadership communication class at the community college. I want to be better, not just for you but for everyone I work with. Thank you for giving me a chance to grow instead of just writing me off. I promise you won't regret it. Linda. When Monday came around, Linda was waiting by my office with a proposal. She'd spent